So you're thinking about adding a new, interesting look to your content creator kit. And over the last couple years, there's certainly been a couple creative options introduced by DJI. So chances are you're probably already familiar with the DJI Pocket 3 or the DJI line of action cameras, likely the 4 or the 5. Both of these are some of the most popular options right now for creators, and honestly for good reason. They are both capable of capturing some absolutely beautiful footage, and in certain situations, some might even see them as interchangeable. But for me, getting the best use out of these cameras is not only understanding where they do overlap, but also where they couldn't be more different. Because honestly, once you know how each of these might play to your strengths, it's easy to figure out which of these might be best for how you create. So today, I'm going to talk about some of the similarities, some of the differences, and really some of the pros and cons of each of these cameras. So by the end of this video, you can have a good idea of which of these cameras might be the best for you. Now personally, I have of course the Pocket 3 and the DJI Action 4, but a lot of this comparison can apply to the Action 5, but I'll kind of note where those differences do lie. Because honestly, a lot of the things that were upgrades in the Action 5 were already things that I have available in the Pocket 3, and we'll talk a little more about that here in a little bit. At any point in this video, if you feel like you're gaining value from that, I would certainly appreciate clicking the like button, and if you care to see any more of this type of content, go ahead and click the subscribe button. You'll also find some affiliate links down below with all the gear that I'm using if you'd like to check that out. So let's start off by talking about where these cameras are similar. Now, both of these cameras are obviously small and compact and are seen as very portable. Obviously, you got the Pocket 3 is named the Pocket for a reason, and that's because it can literally fit in your pocket. But I would argue as much, the Action 4 or Action 5 can certainly fit in your pocket as well. Both of these cameras are gonna come in clutch when it comes to just snagging one of these on the go. Both cameras shoot in 4K up to 120 frames per second or slow motion up to 240 frames per second in 1080. So if you're handling these cameras correctly, you can absolutely get some buttery smooth footage out of both of these cameras. Both of these cameras shoot in 10-bit color, and both have a really great normal color profile as well as DJI's D-Log-M profile, which is DJI's log-like profile, which has a little more dynamic play to it and allows you to more easily color grade your footage. Now I would say both of these cameras have reliable stabilization for different reasons, because they obviously function a little differently, which I'll talk about more here in a bit. And both of these are both really quick to start up if you need to just grab a shot quickly. And I would say both of these make really incredible vlogging cameras, although I would say in different ways. And once again, I'll talk about that here in a little bit as well, but it really kind of comes down to preference. All right, let's talk about some key differences. So if you're watching this video, I'm sure that you're already familiar with the fact that the Pocket 3 has a gimbal head, which means that it has true mechanical stabilization. Whereas the Action 4 or Action 5 are certainly made to be a whole lot more rugged, but they do offer stabilization, and the stabilization in this is gonna be an electronic stabilization, so the functionality works a little different, but it's surprisingly good in this camera. Now, I'm not gonna break down every single setting on these cameras today. I've actually got a video on the Action 4 on this channel, but suffice it to say, I've been really happy with the stabilization out of this camera. Now, definitely a difference you'll find when shooting out of both these cameras is that the field of view out of the Pocket 3 is gonna be a lot tighter than you'll find out of the Action 4 or Action 5. Now, of course, that is an action camera, so even in a standard setting versus wide or extra wide, it's just gonna be a wider shot than your average camera. But it is worth noting that there is a wide angle lens available with the Pocket 3, and if you get the Creator Combo, that does come along with that. Now, there's some downsides to that, and we can talk about that here in a little bit, but it does give you at least the option to have a little bit wider shot. Now, another difference worth noting is that in my experience, the low light performance out of the Pocket 3 is notably better than that of the Action 4. And I mean, even in the regular video mode, now both these cameras have a low light mode, but even in that circumstance, I would give the win to the Pocket 3, and that's of course because of the larger sensor size in the Pocket 3. And truth be told, I really try not to ever use the low light mode because it does have some degradation in quality, but honestly, the low light performance out of this in regular video is pretty incredible. Now, speaking of low light performance, something that is supposed to be an improvement on the Action 5 versus the Action 4 is the low light performance. Now, personally for me, that wasn't gonna be a feature that inspired me to upgrade from the 4 to the Action 5, because like I said, the Pocket 3 just has such great low light performance, but if you don't own any of these cameras, that could be something you consider. And another notable difference is that the Pocket 3 definitely feels a little more delicate. While this is certainly rugged, it just feels overall like you're gonna not have to be as sensitive with it. That's of course what the Action series is made for. And finally for me, a contrast I think about when deciding which of these cameras to pick up is the bokeh blur that you're gonna get out of the Pocket 3, whereas you're gonna get a whole lot more crisp background with the Action 4. Now this is gonna feel a whole lot more immersive as it is an action camera where you're gonna be able to get some more cinematic shots out of that Pocket 3. All right, so let's talk about some of the reasons that I would choose to use one of these over the other. You can kind of think of these as pros, but really it's more kind of my use cases for these cameras specifically. Now let's first talk about maybe some pros for the Pocket 3 and some use cases that I would pick this camera. Now, having used both these cameras for a year and a half or so, and I use them both frequently, my go-to if I'm going to do more of a sit-down shot and talk to the camera, especially if I'm out and about and I'm doing something like sitting down on a bench or maybe sitting down at the coffee bar, my go-to is definitely going to be the Pocket 3. I'm going to get that bokeh background that's going to give that kind of YouTube-y feel, and also that tighter field of view feels a little more like a conversation with somebody on the other side of the lens. Whereas the Action 4 or Action 5 is going to give you a much wider field of view, so you kind of got to zoom in or crop in to make that work. Now, it can work and you get a really good image quality out of this, but for me personally, having both of these cameras, I just often go with this one for that type of shot, so that may come into play when deciding if you're going to get one over the other, which application you tend to shoot more. As I kind of alluded to before, when it comes to shooting in a darker situation where I'm going to need better low light performance, the Pocket 3 is definitely going to be my pick in those circumstances. And if I'm looking to shoot a little more cinematic, especially slow motion footage, like I'm a real estate agent, so I often am shooting social media content where I'd like some slow motion that I can have it really nice and smooth, definitely the go-to is always going to be the Pocket 3. Now, in fairness, of course, you've got enough frame rates in this up to 240, 1080. You can get some pretty smooth footage out of the Action 4. But if you're like me, Captain Jittery Hands, nothing is really going to beat the mechanical gimbal here in terms of stabilization, whereas I've got to be really nice and controlled to get anything comparable out of this when it comes to that type of footage. And to throw another win sort of towards the Pocket 3 in terms of use cases, when it comes to needing something like active tracking, that's a feature that's built into this camera and it's really, really very good. Of course, with that gimbal head, it's actually tracking you with movement, so it does a really nice job of that. The Action 4 does not have anything built in that will accommodate that. It's important to note that the Action 5 does, and honestly, from what I can tell, the active track available in the Action 5, considering it doesn't have a gimbal head, is pretty impressive. So maybe something to take note of if you don't own any of these cameras, but for me, the go-to is always going to be the Pocket 3, and I would say overall, it's probably going to be a more impressive active track. All right, now in fairness, let's talk about some pros and use cases where I would pick up the Action 4 or somebody might pick up an Action 5. Now, this may surprise you. It actually surprised me after using both these cameras for a while, but my go-to now when it comes to vlog shooting, especially outside during the daytime, is actually the Action 4. And that's because honestly, I really love the just very clear footage that it gets. Without the bokeh blur behind me, it picks up a crisp picture of everything with that really wide field of view. You know, it doesn't matter that it's not actively tracking me because it's so wide, I'm always in the shot. Now, as I mentioned, I'm a real estate agent, so I'm often shooting vlog stuff outside to sort of show people the city I live in, because I work with a lot of relocation buyers, and it's important that they see the areas of the city that I'm showing. Whereas you don't get to see as much of that with the Pocket 3 in those vlog shots because honestly, it's a little bit blurred out and the field of view is a little tighter. So that may be different for you depending on sort of the application. Some people really like that bokeh blur for that sort of YouTube-y, vloggy vibe. So consider that whatever your use case might be when it comes to vlog shooting. Now, another strength for sure for the Action 4 is going to be when I'm wanting to mount it in sort of questionable situations. Like say I'm going to mount it to the hood of my car or the roof of my car or the side of my car. There's pretty much no circumstance, unless I just absolutely have to have the shot, that I'm going to feel comfortable mounting the Pocket 3 to my car. But I'm pretty confident even if this thing falls off my car, it's gonna be fine. And honestly, this thing has gotten some great driving shots. The electronic stabilization in this is really impressive and it just looks really good. Now, this may be stating the obvious, but another strength of this is using it as an action camera. So when I'm wanting to film while I'm riding my bike, or POV shots when I'm walking, or really anything that you would normally use an action camera for, well, probably no surprise, the Action 4 wins. And increasingly more when I'm doing a little more run and gun shooting or grabbing something just kind of on the spot, I nearly always just grab the Action 4 over the Pocket 3. They can both perform pretty quickly, but I tend to find myself being a little more careful getting this out, and I know I can just be a little more, I don't know, just grab it, pull it out, and have no concerns. Now, I think it's important, and probably just in fairness, to talk about a couple of weaknesses in both of these cameras. I already touched on a couple of these, but when it comes to the Pocket 3, really the first thing I would probably mention is just it's a little more delicate. I've got to be a little more sensitive when handling this camera. And another thing that I would consider a weakness of this camera is just that tighter field of view, and even though it does have that wide angle lens available because I did get the creator combo. Honestly, I almost never use that anymore, partially because I have the Action 4, but honestly, I don't really like the distortion that comes along with using that wide angle lens. Some people may not mind that, but personally, I don't really like having that distortion in the shot, and I don't really feel like fixing it in post. So I definitely consider that a limitation of this camera. So some limitations of the Action 4, as I mentioned a couple times already, but that low light performance is just not up to par, and sometimes that's kind of a bummer. Now, like I said, if I'm shooting in just kind of darker circumstances in general, I'll just grab the Pocket 3. Where it's a little disappointing is, as I said, I like the vlog shots coming out of this camera more, especially as a real estate agent, but shooting in a home can be really challenging and the lighting situations aren't always predictable. So if I had my choice, I would always shoot with this because I can show the home behind me very, very clearly, but sometimes it's a little too dark in certain areas that I just can't get away with it without introducing too much noise by, fixing the brightness in post. And if I had to be just a little bit picky, I would say that even though the stabilization in this is actually excellent for an action camera, by comparison, I definitely just don't think that it's gonna perform as buttery smooth as you're gonna find out of the Pocket 3. So in fairness, I just gotta put that as a little bit of a weakness out of the Action 4. So what do you think? Do any of you guys own the Pocket 3 or the Action 4 or Action 5 cameras, or do any of you own both of them? Let me know your thoughts down below. Which one do you like better? And if you haven't picked up either of these cameras, I hope this video was helpful in kind of determining which one might be the best fit for your creation style. And if you'd like to check out my favorite accessories for the Action 4 or the Pocket 3, those videos should be on screen right now. And otherwise, guys, until next time, go make something rad. See ya.